In Mount Welcome, a lot of you withhold nothing from God. You give your all to God. This church is because you decided to do all you could to bring it into fruition. I've learned a lot. As I've looked, as I've listened, as I've learned, I've realized the impact that many of you all have made. The sacrifices that you have made to make Mount Welcome what it is today. But I've also realized power is resting in this place. I realized that there's potential sitting in these pews. I've realized that there are possibilities trying to push down these walls. I need you to pray with me this morning. As I prayed about this sermon that I am preaching, this sermon rested on my spirit. This text stayed in my heart. I planned to preach something else. I knew I wouldn't be preaching this, but this just stuck by. And maybe this sermon is for me. Maybe it is for me like most of my sermons. Most of my sermons start out as a sermon for me, something that I need to hear. God preaches it to me, and then I just give it to you. And daily, I ask myself a simple question, Mount Welcome. I ask myself a simple question. I ask myself, am I giving my all to God? Am I giving my all to God? Every day I say, am I putting my best effort toward the kingdom of God? Am I doing my all for the kingdom? I have to ask that on occasion. I often, in my private prayers, I ask for forgiveness for not giving my all, for the times that I've slipped, the times that I hadn't done everything that I need to do. My question to you, church, is, are you serving God with all your might? Are you serving God with all your might? Are you all in for God? As a child, there was a phrase we used to use that when I was a child, when I was growing up, and even sometimes today, when you were trying to do something big, when you were trying to do something that seemed unsurmountable, when things seemed like you couldn't possibly do it, you say, I'm going to do this with all my might. Somebody's going to get this in a minute. Somebody's going to get this in a minute. If you were doing something with all your might, it meant that you were usually using all of your strength and all of your energy. You were putting your all into it. If you were trying to lift some weights and you were lifting them with all your might, the veins were popping out of your neck. If you were leading a song and you were singing it with all your might, you weren't looking pretty. I help me, Holy Ghost. If you're doing something with all your might, you're unconcerned about how people are going to look at you. The text for today is pulled from a period in Jesus' life where he is questioning his next move, where he is wondering about the moves of those around him. In the verses that precede, Jesus warns about the teachers of the law, the teachers with their nice robes and those people that want to sit in a space where everybody can see them. He's saying that they are going to take advantage of the widows. He says, be careful of those folk who want all of the attention. This text is toward the end of Jesus' earthly ministry. He is in the temple in Jerusalem, and his disciples are with him, and it is during Passover week, the last week of Jesus' life. The text tells us that Jesus looked up and saw the rich putting their gifts into the treasury. This placed him in the temple. So he's in the temple, and he's watching folk put their gifts into the offering baskets per se. Likely Jesus and his disciples were sitting in the court of women, outside the portico in the area of the treasury. See, in those days, women were excluded from being in the sanctuary. You know, much like sometimes folk want to exclude women from the pulpit. Help me, Holy Ghost. But here it is. The women couldn't even come into the sanctuary. There was this place called the portico, and so the women were in the portico. But now peep this. Check this out. Here it is. That the temple didn't want them in the sanctuary, but they made sure they had the offering baskets outside. Don't you know folk will use you up? But that's another sermon for another day. See, the treasury was different from the offering. The offering, you brought animals and you sacrificed the animals inside of the temple, but the gifts were given outside in the portico, and only men were allowed inside of the temple. But in the portico, Jewish women and Jewish males could reside in this area. In the King James translation, I read from the New King James translation. It says that the rich men gave from their abundance, as it says, but in the NIV version, it says that the rich, not just the rich men, but all of the rich were putting their gifts into the treasury. They were making it rain with 10s, 20s, and 100s into the treasury. And so here they are. They're giving their money, and Jesus sees a teachable moment. Jesus sees a teachable moment, and he uses this to teach his disciples a very valuable lesson. To truly understand this text, one must understand the social location of the characters in this story. Jesus speaks of and the surroundings in this story. See, the court of women, the portico which I just spoke about, was just outside the main sanctuary, and the people placed their gift in a series of 13 baskets. There were 13 baskets shaped like trumpets outside, and each basket was earmarked for a certain or particular item on the budget of the temple. So you decided where you wanted to put your money in these 13 shaped baskets, and all of them you walked by and you put your money where you wanted to. See, Passover was important because Passover was a pilgrimage. And every Jew was required to take that pilgrimage to Jerusalem during Passover. This was one of the most important times in the Jewish faith. And so everybody came to Jerusalem expecting to give to the church. They expected to give to the temple. They brought their money to pay their temple tax, to pay their taxes to Caesar, and to even pay in the sense their tithes and their offering. The text tells us that the rich were giving, and a poor widow gave 2 copper pennies. In the NIV version, it says 2 copper coins. But in the King James version, it says 2 mites. 2 mites. Somebody's going to catch this on the way home. We got to serve God with all our might. Yet Jesus says the widow gave more than the rich. The widow gave more than the rich. Then Jesus explains why she gave more. He says that she gave out of her poverty, and the rich gave out of their wealth. Wait, let me break this down. He said that the poor woman gave out of her poverty what she didn't have, but the rich gave out of their overflow. I wish somebody was praying with me this morning. So she gave out of her lack, and they gave out of their abundance. She gave out of what she knew she didn't have. They gave out of what they knew they could spare. I wish somebody was praying with me this morning. See, the Greek word the Greek word for poor, it means labor hard for a living. It means one who labors extremely hard for a living. The word that is used some of the time in this text, or normally even in older English, is penury, and which means a cramping or an oppressive lack of resources. And simply, it means that you just straight up poor. You know, now you're not poor, you poor. Well, you know, you poor. You can't even afford the extra O and the R. You poor. Women had little power in Jesus' day, and the widow had no power. See, her power was determined by her wealth, or by the wealth of her sons, or the money that her husband left her. Widows were allowed to, widows were so poor that they were allowed to glean in the fields after the harvest, according to Deuteronomy 24:19 through 22. Wait, let me break this down. So gleaning, that means that the planters would come out, pick everything they wanted, and the stuff that dropped out of their baskets, you could go behind them and pick up. You know the story of Ruth. You know, Ruth went and gleaned in the field of Boaz. And then Ruth saw that she could get a little something better, but that's another sermon for another day. And so here it is. The widows could glean in the field. They could go and follow behind. And so that tells us that the widows didn't have a whole lot. To put it in modern day language, but basically, the women would have been going to some type of food bank or something to get food, or they would be going to the stores asking for the stuff that's about to expire. If you put it in a modern day context, widows were so poor that oftentimes, according to Deuteronomy 26:12, every third year the Levites had to share the offering. With the widows. And so money was set aside for the widows. They understood that a widow could not work for herself. A widow women had no power in this day. If you weren't connected to a man, you had nothing. If you lost your husband, and you didn't have any sons, remember the story of Ruth. If you lost your husband and had no sons, then you had no one that you could depend on. Jesus didn't have issue with the gifts that the rich were given. Now, don't go home and say he had issue with rich folk. No, Jesus didn't have issue with the gifts they were given. Jesus, this teachable moment, he used this as a teachable moment because she was using all her might and giving her gifts. Somebody's going to get that in a minute. And she was using all her might to serve God. But the others were living out of their overflow. They were just giving. They were giving what they had to spare. That they were giving the extra that they had. But she was giving her all. I asked the question, why do we serve God? Why don't we serve God with all our might? Why do we just give half to God? Why don't we serve God with all our might? The first thing I came up with from the text is, one, weak insight. Weak insight. Weak insight. We can't see who God created us to be. See, somebody in here is sitting up and you living in mediocrity. You living in mediocrity because you can't see who God created you to be. You just float around. You float around and do enough just to get by. You don't give all your might because you think you can't give all your might. You think you're not good enough to give all your might. You question who you are. You have weak insight. We can't see who God created us to be. But we allow the world to define and confine us. Our weak insight allows the world to define and confine us. We sit up and we watch media and we believe what the media says about people who look like us. But one simple, if a person, if a Anglo-Saxon walks into a theater and kills folk, the media is going to say, well, he was a good guy, but I guess he just had some mental issues. If a black man gets shot by the police, the media is going to say, oh, he had a criminal record from 20 years ago. It's the picture that people paint about us, and we believe it. We believe it. We believe it. Our oppression imprisons us. It causes weak insight. We cannot recognize the God inside of us. The media has messed us up so much that we can't even see the God inside of us. When we look in the mirror, all we see is the negative about us. All we see is the negative about our people. And we have weak insight. But the other thing we have a weak outlook. We have a weak outlook. We allow our station in life to define us. Here it is, the widow, let me say that again. The widow, if she was on a scale of society, she wouldn't be up here. She would be way down here. The widow, she gave all her might. We allow our station in life. People tell us, we allow what folks say about us to define us. We allow where we come from to define us. We may have come from a one family, a one parent household. We may have come from out of the project, and too often we let that stuff define us. We say, well, because I'm from here, I can't do this. Because I'm from there, I can't do that. And we allow our station in life to define us. We let our location limit us. We say, well, because I didn't go to this school, because I didn't do this, then I can't do this. We allow our situation to trap us. This woman who was a widow, she could have said, well, I'm a widow. I don't have anything to give. I'm just going to stay at home. But she said, no, I'm not going to let my situation trap me and stop me from serving God with all my might. We have weak insight. We have a weak outlook, but we also have weak input. Oh, help me, Holy Ghost. We have weak input. We have weak input. We don't study the process. We don't study. Here it is. We want to do big things. We want to be big, but we don't study. We say, okay, you know what? I want to run a Fortune 500 company, but we don't put in the work to run a Fortune 500 company. We don't study the process. We don't read enough. We don't do enough. We don't study enough. And we sit up and we wait for other people to tell us. Don't you know that information is the new capital? We don't push. We don't put out. We don't put the work in. The thing is, too many of us, we want to just blow up. Particularly young people. We just want to blow up. We want to be big time. We want to be big time without doing anything. But we don't realize you got to put in the work. To give all your might, you got to put in the work. You got to get up. See, the thing is, you might not be the quickest. You might not be the smartest. But you got to get up before the quickest and the smartest and do everything you can to make sure you put yourself in. See, we don't put in the practice. We don't want to practice. And so therefore it hinders us. But the other thing is weak input. We don't push the work out. We don't perform. When it's time to perform, we just give enough. We just do enough. Just enough to get by. Just enough to get by. We don't do it with all our might. when I ran track, when I ran track, when you run track, there are rounds, and so the first round, normally, particularly, you want to run in such a way that you don't extend too much energy. And the second round, you might extend a little bit more, but if you know you have 3 rounds to run, you're going to limit the amount of energy that you extend. Well, too often, we be on race day, and we're acting like we in the first round. We're just giving enough to get by. Just do it. And what trips me out is, regardless of what you're doing or whether you're being paid for it or whatever, you just do enough to get by. Y'all know, you go to work and you just do enough to get by. But you want a promotion. You just do enough to get by. And wait, you want to start your own business, but you just do enough to get by. We don't perform like there is weak insight, weak outlook, and weak input. But I had to ask myself, what made the widow serve God with all her might? What made her serve God with all her might? She was given all, she had given all she had to truly understand. We must understand the amount that she was given. Now the text says that she gave 2 copper coins, or in the King James Version it says she gave 2 mites. So this was the smallest amount in the Jewish currency, and so we hear denarii all of the time, but a mite was 1/120th of a denarii. It was 1/8 of a penny. Wait, 1/8 of a penny. You can't even fathom that in your head. You can't even understand 1/8 of a penny. A penny ain't nothing. You walk by pennies on the street all the time. But she gave all she had. The widow understood that regardless of her station in life, her situation, she still had to serve God with all her might. She had to serve God with all her might. She understood that living in your promise, and even sometimes outside of your promise, even outside of where you might not necessarily want to be, you still got to serve God with all of your might. You have to serve God with all of your might all of the time. The widow in the text realized that serving with all your might is selfless. It's self-secure, and it's socially responsible. Let me break that down. All your might is selfless. It's selfless. You know Elijah. You know Elijah the prophet. Elijah the prophet, he was selfless because he put his life on the line to serve his people. With all your might, you're unconcerned about what will happen to you, what will become of you, because you're serving God with all your might. You know Jeremiah, the one who spent years in a pit. He served God with all of his might because he understands when you come to serve God, you got to serve God with all of your might. It is a selfless ordeal. You can't think about yourself. The other thing is you have to be self-secure. With all your might, you have to be self-secure. See, the Lord your God, it says, serve the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your mind, and with all of your strength. If you understand this, if you're going to serve God, you have to be secure in the fact that if I'm giving God my all, then God is going to give me all his all. God, you have to be secure in yourself and know that if that no weapon formed against you can prosper. That if God stands with you, then who can stand against you? You have to know that whatever becomes of it, I'm still going to win. I'm going to be victorious. You have to serve God with all of your might. You have to be selfless. You have to be self-secure, but also you have to be socially responsible. You have to be socially responsible. What do you mean, Reverend Robinson? Why do you have to be socially responsible? See, when you are serving God with all of your might, that means that you are not just concerned about yourself, but you're concerned about society. society. You're concerned about what happens around you. You are concerned about the impact or the footprint that you leave in this world. You're concerned about how many people you're going to affect along this journey. I'm reminded of Peter. You know Peter. In all of his issues, with all of his issues, Peter was socially responsible. He was concerned about what was happening in the world around him. You know Stephen, the one they made a deacon, the first martyr of the church. He was socially responsible. Even the widow in this story, she was socially responsible. She didn't think about, I have to eat. She thought about somebody else has to eat. God's kingdom has to be moving and flowing. She thought about what she could do for the kingdom. When you are serving God with all of your might, you're going to do all that you can. I'm reminded, since we are in the midst of the NBA playoffs, I'm reminded of 1996 when Michael Jordan was playing. Michael Jordan was playing in one of the playoff games, and he happened to have pneumonia. In that, now you look at last season's game. LeBron James and Steph Curry. There were quarters where there were no scores, where no team scored. But Michael Jordan, one of the things that I respect about this brother is if Michael Jordan always played with all his might. Michael Jordan always left everything on the floor. In 1996, they were playing the Arizona Suns, and he happened to have pneumonia. But Michael Jordan could have said, Coach, I can't play this game. I'm going to sit out. But Michael Jordan got up and played, and they had to carry him off the floor. He played with all his might. I'm reminded of Mary Bethel Bethune. It was a sister who just had a few dollars in her pocket, but was determined to start a college for people that looked like her. She served God with all her might. I'm reminded of Nat Turner, the one who went up against those who would enslave him. He served God with all his might. I'm reminded of Rosa Parks. You know that sister that sat down and decided not to get up. She sat on that seat with all her might. I'm reminded of Moses. You know, the brother who led his people out of Israel. The one who led his people out of Israel, who had all of the chatter in his ear. The people who didn't believe him. Still, he served his people with all his might. Now, I'm reminded of Deborah, the one who they came to. You know, they looked down on women, but Deborah said, I'll lead you. You know Deborah the judge, she said, I'm going to serve God with all of my might. With all my, y'all not feeling this right now. Y'all don't seem too excited about this right now. And I'm reminded of Jesus, the one who's in the story, who finds himself sitting in the temple, trying to give his disciples a teachable moment. He's telling them that you got to serve with all your might. You cannot sit by and just give half to God. You have to serve with all of your might. You can't get on the cross with half. You can't get on. You got to go to the cross with all your might. You cannot be whipped all night with half. You got to be in it and serve God with all of your might. You cannot allow the naysayers, the negative folk, to whisper in your ear while you are stretched wide. You got to serve with all your might. See, you got to withhold nothing. You have to withhold nothing. I like what William McDowell said. He says, I surrender all to you. Everything I give to you, withholding nothing. When I remember as a child, I would race on the streets. And you know how you get it and you take off your shoes. Y'all don't know about that. You take off your shoes, take off anything that's going to restrict you, and you run like your life depended on it. Don't you know that God is asking you to serve like your life depended on? Wait. Okay, you know what? I just missed something. Guess what? Your life depends on it. Your salvation depends on it. God is you to serve with all your might. Not from your abundance. In the earlier service, I talked about how we give God what's left over. You know how you do. Well, somebody asks you to come to a meeting. Well, if I have time, I'm kind of busy this week, but if I have time, I'll come over. No, God, if you're asked to do it, then God's gonna provide for it. Serve God with all your might. And so you might be tired, but guess what? It's gonna be all right. You can sleep when you're dead in your grave. Serve God with all your might. We think, okay, well, I don't have time, or I don't have resources, or I don't know how to do that. But God is saying, serve me with all your might. And you know the story of the man who had the withered hand, and Jesus says, hand me your hand. Jesus doesn't say, hand me your withered hand. Jesus just says, hand me your hand. And the man stretches out his withered hand. Well, the beautiful thing in that story is the brother understood that I'm handing you my brokenness. Wait. And so you might think, I can't serve God because I'm a little broken. But guess what? God is asking for the brokenness. God is just saying, you know what? Give me. Just give me what you have. And if you give me what you have, I'll fix it. I'll fix it, and I'll do some stuff that will blow your mind. You can't even fathom what I have in store for you. You know why a lot of us aren't in our promise? Because it's just enough. I ain't talking about money. I'm talking about your effort. Okay, God, well, if I have time, God, I'll give you that. Well, I'll get back with you, God. But God is saying, no. Just serve me with all your might. Serve me until you get ugly. Because when you're doing it with all your might, you're not concerned about how pretty you look. One of the things about shouting. My cousin, he's a pastor of a Pentecostal church. And every once in a while I go and I sit up and I watch. And I sit up and I know who's really in the spirit and who's not. See, because the people really in the spirit, they don't care what they showing. They don't care what they doing. They can fall out on the floor, dress me up, every hair be a wig fly off. But the people that's just there for show, that's not with all your might. And so I stopped by to remind you. I stopped by to remind you that this text tells us to just serve God. Just try it. Just try it for the next month. Say, God, I'm going to serve you with all my might. I'm going to give my all to you. And I guarantee you, at the end of 30 days, you'll be better for it. You'll be better for it. We open the doors of the church.